On March 12, 1912, a violent encounter left a judge, a prosecutor, the sheriff, and two others dead at the Carroll County Courthouse in Hillsville, Virginia. How things got to that point and what happened afterward is our story for today. Hello, folks. I'm Steve Gilly, along with Rod Mullins, and this is Stories, a History of Appalachia. Now, be sure to go down below, click that subscribe button if you don't mind, and ding the bell so you get notification every time we put out a new story. And, folks, if you don't mind, please give us a thumbs up too, okay?
Steve, this is one of those stories that makes you kind of scratch your head and wonder about courthouse security and how lax in some ways it used to be, how tightened and just so rigid now and everything when it comes to courthouse security, but still things can happen and manage to happen as they did in Carroll County back in 1912, I think, with this
1912, and it probably didn't help that back in that time, at least in some parts of Appalachia, you could carry your guns, and I say guns in the plural, wherever you go, church, school, courthouse, what have you. And that just ended up not being a good thing in this particular case. Of course, it all comes down to some hot tempers and feelings of being run over by the law, what have you. But we'll get into that as we get into this story.
Okay.
Floyd Allen was born on July 5th, 1856 in Hillsville, Virginia, a town not far from the New River in Carroll County. Floyd and his brother Sidna had license to make alcohol. They had land, and they had political connections in Carroll County as they were active in local Democratic politics, which at that time was the only party with any power in that part of Appalachia. Now, all these things worked to make the Allen brothers powerful men in those parts and to make Floyd the patriarch of the Allen clan. Allen was noted for his generosity, often helping folks down in their luck. But along with his abilities, Rod, and the land and the political influence, Floyd Allen had something else: a quick, hot temper and easily wounded pride that got his tail in the crack, as they say, many, many times. He had a history of violent altercations, including shooting a black man in North Carolina, beating a police officer in Mount Airy, and later shooting his own cousin.
Wow. Well, in May of 1889, Sidna and another brother, Garland Allen, were tried for carrying concealed pistols and for assaulting a group of 13 men. Two guys, 13 men. Floyd Allen was also indicted for that assault, but his charges were later dropped while Garland and Sidna pleaded no contest in September of 1889, and they were fined $5 each plus court costs. In 1904, Floyd wanted to buy a farm, but he and the seller couldn't agree on a price. The seller's brother, Noah Combs, took a liking to that piece of land, and despite Floyd's warning not to butt into his negotiations, he bought it for the full asking price. Now, that wasn't a wise decision for Mr. Combs, because not long after the land was sold, Floyd Allen shot and wounded Noah Combs and was subsequently arrested and charged with assault. Allen was tried, convicted, and then sentenced to the jury, to 1 hour by the jury, I should say, to 1 hour in jail and a $100 fine, which Floyd promptly appealed after posting bond and just simply walking out of the jail.
And Rod, not just any lawyer was representing Floyd Allen on that appeal of an hour in jail. His defense team included former Commonwealth's Attorney Walter Tipton and the former county court judge Oglesby. Before the case could be heard, though, Virginia Governor Andrew J. Montague pardoned him, believe it or not. Well, when the Allen boy's father died, differences arose between the brothers, and as a result, Floyd got into a gunfight with his brother Jasper, or Jack, a local constable in Carroll County, who you'll hear more about as the story goes on. Floyd ended up shooting his brother in the head, just a glancing blow, though, and so Jack shot Floyd in the chest, whereupon Floyd began to beat the you-know-what out of Jack with his empty pistol. For that, he was arrested, tried, and sentenced to, believe it or not, 1 hour in jail and a $100 fine. Now, Floyd refused to go to jail and never did for this incident, swearing that he'd
never spend a minute in jail as long as the blood flowed through his veins.
And his run-ins with the law continued.
Well, in 1908, Floyd Allen was charged with unlawful assault upon prisoners in his custody. On February 1st, he was tried and convicted and then sentenced to 10 days in jail and a $10 fine. So, no hour in jail this time around, but 10 days in jail and a $10 fine. So, yeah, did he go to jail? Right? No, because Virginia Governor Claude Swanson pardoned him and restored his right to hold political office. But Floyd's time outwitting the law was soon coming to an end. Virginia legal reforms at this time set up the circuit court system with a full time judge on the circuit of several counties in an effort to stop people like one Floyd Allen from gaming the system.
And, Rod, that's when all the violence and contempt of the law that Floyd Allen held came to a head with tragedy in Hillsville. And it all started with a corn shucking bee, of all things.
Hmm.
Wesley and Sidna Edwards were nephews of Floyd Allen, who lived in the Hillsville area. In December 1910, the two young men attended a corn shucking bee in Hillsville, apparently a big thing back in those days for boys to meet girls. While there, Wesley kissed a girl who was seeing another young man named Will Thomas, and this, understandably, led to an altercation between Mr. Edwards and Mr. Thomas. Well, nothing came of it that night, but things would change the next morning. At church that next morning, Will Thomas challenged Wesley Edwards to a fight over the girl. And according to Wesley, Thomas and his friends assaulted him, and he defended himself with his help from his brother, Sidna. As a result, Wesley and Sidna were charged with disorderly conduct, assault with a deadly weapon, disturbing a public worship service, a couple of other charges as well. But instead of surrendering to the police, the two boys headed south over the state line to North Carolina, where they found jobs in a granite quarry.
Real Christian thing to do to challenge somebody to a fight on Sunday morning after a corn shucking bee. Well, I digress. A warrant was soon issued for the arrest of the two, and Surry County, North Carolina sheriffs soon arrested both men on that warrant. Thomas Samuels, a Carroll County deputy, and his driver, a man named Peter Easter, traveled in a buggy to the state line to pick up the brothers from Surry County sheriffs. Now, since there was only one set of handcuffs in the buggy, Wesley was handcuffed in the front seat and Sidna was tied up in the back seat. And then the four got underway to the jail in Hillsville. And that's where Floyd comes in. Floyd Allen met the buggy south of Sidna Allen's home as he was on his way to his own home. Deputy Samuels pulled a gun and ordered Floyd to move away, and Floyd rode back past the buggy, I should say, to Sidna's store, where he then blocked the narrow road with his mare. Samuels again pulled his gun on Floyd. A fight ensued, and Floyd beat Samuel with his own pistol. Now, Wesley Edwards tried to grapple with Easter, but Easter got away and fired a shot at Floyd as he did so, wounding Floyd in the finger, of all things. Floyd then released the Edwards brothers, and Easter ran to an acquaintance's home, and he telephoned the sheriff. Yes, they had telephones at this time, and they telephoned the sheriff at Hillsville. Deputy Samuels was left unconscious in the ditch, and his horse was, well, it just simply run off.
Well, apparently having cooled off over the weekend, on Monday, Floyd Allen turned his nephews over to the court. The Edwards brothers were tried and convicted of their crimes, with Wesley sentenced to 60 days and Sidna sentenced to 30. Now, that's not the end of it, though. The Carroll County Commonwealth's attorney in 1912, a man named William Foster, who had held the office for 8 years and had just recently switched parties from the Democrats to the Republicans, had become a prominent leader of the GOP in Carroll County and had become a political enemy of the Allens when he beat Walter Allen for the Commonwealth's attorney's position in the last election. And Foster wanted something done about Floyd Allen's attack on that buggy carrying his nephews back from North Carolina. He called a grand jury to investigate the escape. And Floyd Allen, he agreed to testify, and he admitted to roughing up the Deputy Samuels, but denied intending to free the prisoners. He told the grand jury,
"That there Samuels was abusing the boys. He had them handcuffed and tied up with a rope. I just can't bear to see anyone drug around."
The grand jury indicted Floyd Allen, along with Sidna Allen and Barnett Allen, for interfering with the deputy in the course of his duties. Floyd was also indicted for assault and battery upon Deputy Samuels.
Well, the case was set for trial, and suddenly Deputy Samuels left the state for parts unknown. Well, it turns out that someone had sent word to the deputy that Floyd would kill him if he testified against him. Well, this development caught the attention of the court, and in particular, Judge Thornton L. Massey. He called Floyd's brother and an earlier victim, Constable Jack Allen, to the bench to question him about the alleged threats to the deputy's life. Jack denied any responsibility for the allegations of intimidation and insisted neither he nor his brother was guilty of any wrongdoing. Now, the judge told Jack that if he couldn't keep law and order in the county, then he'd call in the state troops to do so, something that didn't sit well with Jack Allen, who remarked that he'd not let any man talk to him that way. Well, Floyd was brought to trial on March 13, 1912, represented by two former Carroll County judges, Walter Tipton and David Bolin. Mr. Easter testified in the case that after all the proof from both sides was presented, the jury was sequestered for the night to make their decision.
Tension was high in the courtroom the next day when the jury entered with its verdict. Judge Massey and Sheriff Webb both expected trouble. And many of the Allen clan were in the courtroom, and most of them were armed with pistols. Then the jury foreman spoke. He announced a guilty verdict and a 1-year sentence in the state penitentiary. Floyd Allen immediately spoke up straight to Judge Massey.
"If you sentence me on that verdict, I will kill you."
Well, the judge ignored him, sentencing him to a year in state prison. On this, according to, I think his own attorney had said this from what he had seen, Floyd rose, he stumbled, he was wordless, stunned, to be quite honest with you, and looking totally in shock that someone would dare sentence him to prison. He regained his composure enough to say,
"I just tell you, I ain't a-going."
and that, Rod, is when all hell broke out, isn't it?
Yeah, you turned it loose on me when all hell breaks loose. That's what you did. You have a fondness for doing this to me on these podcasts. But anyway, shots broke out in the courtroom, but nobody knows for sure who started firing. In the melee, Judge Massey, Sheriff Webb, Commonwealth Attorney Foster, and the jury foreman, a man named Augustus C. Fowler, were all shot and killed. Now, Elizabeth Ayers, a 19-year-old witness against Floyd Allen, she was shot in the back and died the next day. Floyd was shot and badly wounded in the hip, thigh, and knee, and was moved to the Elliott Hotel by his son Victor. So when deputies arrested Floyd at the hotel on the next day, he tried, now I say that, he tried to slash his own throat with a pocket knife, but was overpowered before he could do so.
Now that, Rod, is somebody who does not want to go to jail. If you're willing to do that.
He said it. He said it plain and simple. I ain't a-going.
Well, Virginia Governor William Hodges Mann called the Baldwin Felts Detective Agency into service to find those responsible for the shootings and bring them to custody. And you know why he did that?
No. How come? Why did he do that?
Well, whenever in Virginia, at least at this time, whenever the sheriff was no longer in office, which the sheriff wasn't because he was dead, then the deputies have no authority to do anything. So the Virginia governor would have to step in, and he could either bring in the state police or he could bring in a private force and deputize them, which is what he did with the Baldwin Felts men. Okay. Anyway, rewards were posted for Sidna Allen, Claude Allen, Friel Allen, and Wesley Edwards, dead or alive. Within weeks, all but Sidna Allen and Wesley Edwards had been captured. But they were soon captured. You see, Wesley had a sweetheart named Maud Iroler, who he had planned to marry. She, or possibly her father, who had a dislike for Wesley, told the Baldwin Felts men that the fugitives were in Des Moines, Iowa, in return for $500 in reward money. Floyd Allen was tried. He was found guilty of the murder of Commonwealth's Attorney Foster on May 18, 1912. In July, Floyd's son, Claude Allen, was also found guilty of Foster's murder, along with second-degree murder of Judge Massey. Floyd and Claude were sentenced to die in the electric chair. And again, here's where it gets a little bit interesting, right?
Yeah, you turned it loose on me again here when it gets interesting a little bit more. Governor Mann, who had received death threats over calling in the Baldwin Felts men, was in Pennsylvania on a state trip after learning from his son that his lieutenant governor, James Taylor Ellison, was trying to commute the two men's sentences while he was gone. That's one example of the right hand not knowing what the left is doing in this case. He immediately returned to Virginia, issuing the following statement upon arriving in the State House in Richmond.
Hearing at 5 minutes to 3 this morning of the action taken in the Allen cases after I left the city, I considered it my duty to hurry back. I have not the slightest doubt of the guilt of Floyd and Claude Allen, and I will not interfere. The law must take its course.
Governor Mann refused to commute Floyd's sentence, and Floyd was sent to the electric chair on March 28, 1913. Claude followed his father to the chair 11 minutes later.
Floyd left behind a letter setting out his side of what happened. His last words were,
"I did not kill Judge Massey. Those who have wronged me I forgive, and I hope that we will meet in a better world where sorrow is never known. Praying God's blessings upon our dear old state and all of our people, I say farewell."
Sidney Allen pleaded guilty and got a 35-year sentence for voluntary manslaughter and second-degree murder of Foster and Massey, respectively. Wesley Edwards got 9 years for each count of murder of Foster, Massey, and Sheriff Webb for a total of 27 years. Sidney Edwards got 15 years. So, justice has been done. Maybe, maybe not. You see, in 1922, Governor Elbert Trinkle pardoned Sidney Edwards. In 1926, Governor Harry Byrd pardoned Sidney Allen and Wesley Edwards. And what of Jack Allen, you might be asking? Well, he lost his job as constable as a result of that Hillsville shooting, and soon he lost his life. On March 17, 1916, he stopped for the night in a roadhouse near Mount Airy, North Carolina, where he encountered Will McGraw, a moonshine hauler. A dispute arose between McGraw and Jack Allen. That's a nice way of saying they got into a big old fight about the Hillsville tragedy. And during the confrontation, McGraw drew a gun and shot Allen twice, killing him on the spot. And Jack Allen was buried near his home in Carroll County in the presence of 1,000 mourners.
Wow, Steve. And to think, going back about 15 years, I drove by this courthouse. Now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the courthouse that sits in Hillsville is a very old courthouse. It's stone. But, I drove past that almost, every weekend when I was traveling to work, when I was working in Martinsville. But I'm telling you, that was, when I found this out, I was kind of taken aback. I was like, you mean a murder, just cold-blooded murder took place inside those walls at that courthouse? I was amazed to hear this. But, it's pretty much, it's common knowledge around most of the state of Virginia about this incident. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it made some national news here several years ago for this big dispute that happened at the courthouse.
Oh, it made national news when it happened. I mean, this was like the Hatfields and the McCoys as far as news went. And I guess it was also that looking back at us and Appalachia and saying, look at those violent hillbillies down there. But in this case, they were probably right, because this was probably the most violent incident to happen in a courtroom in American history. And folks, that's the story of the Hillsville Courthouse Shootout and Massacre. Another bit of the history of this place we call home, Appalachia. Thanks for listening. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast if you'd like. Just do so on your favorite podcast app. Until next we meet. So long, everybody.
So long.